Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Livery Hall at Guildhall, those who are here in person and those joining us online. I'm Alderman Vincent Keaveny, the 693rd Lord Mayor of the City of London, and I am really delighted to welcome you all to this launch of Global Investment Futures, the new campaign to preserve and promote the UK worldwide as a leading investment management centre. This is a new partnership between the City of London Corporation, the Department for International Trade and the Investment Association. The partnership, supported by KPMG, is the start of an enduring campaign to support the sector. Our ambition is to raise the profile of the UK as a leading centre for investment management, ensuring that we remain attractive as an investment destination, and we want to share this message across the globe. Thank you to everyone for joining the launch, both online and in the hall, especially our expert panelists, Sean Hegarty from Vanguard, Caroline Conlon from Aberdeen, Martin Gilby from Franklin Templeton, and Claire Bousfield from M&G. And of course, welcome to the chair of the panel, Chris Cummings, Chief Executive of the Investment Association. We are also very honoured to be joined virtually by Lord Grimstone, the Minister for Investment, and John Glen, the City Minister, both great friends of the City of London. And of course, I'm very glad to be joined by my City of London colleague, Catherine McGuinness, our Policy Chair. Today, we are showcasing the UK's many strengths in investment management. Our position at the crossroads of UK's biggest financial and tech sectors means we are one of the globe's foremost hubs for innovation. Our unique combination of the time zone, language, legal system, and global talent gives us a financial services ecosystem which makes us the gateway to global capital and advice. This is a compelling and competitive offer. As well as talking about it, we've been listening to what investors from around the world have been saying so that we can be even more competitive in the future. As Lord Mayor, my theme for the City of London is people and purpose, investing in a better tomorrow. So I'm encouraged by how highly environmental, social and governance principles have featured in the discussions, how much the UK's strengths in ESG are recognised as a vital part of our offer to the world, and how much determination there is there for us to make further progress. The voices of all those within the sector will be key to helping us meet these challenges and opportunities. I hope you will be able to join us to help shape a positive and compelling narrative about the UK investment management industry, underlying that the UK is the best place to do business, the best place to connect to global markets, and the best place to invest in a greener future. Now, I am delighted to introduce the Minister for Investment, Lord Gerry Grimstone. Due to parliamentary business, he is joining us live from Westminster via video. Thank you, and over to Lord Grimstone.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Lord Mayor, for that kind introduction. And I'm really pleased to be joining you to introduce the Global Investment Futures campaign that my department, the Department for International Trade, is launching alongside the City of London Corporation and the Investment Association. I would very much like to have been with you in person, but we have some House of Lords business I have to attend to this afternoon, so I'm calling from my office in the House of Lords. I've got immense pride in our asset management industry, which of course plays such an integral role in making the UK one of the world's leading financial centres. The sector has a remarkable £11 trillion of assets under management, employs more than 100,000 people, and makes up 1% of the UK's GDP, all astounding figures. And of course, it is a truly international industry. Almost 50% of assets under management are held for overseas investors. And of course, that's a sector which, because of my financial services background, I know extremely well. And as a former chairman of Standard Life Aberdeen, I know the sector creates jobs and prosperity, not just here in London, but across the length and the breadth of the country. Now, the reason that we've launched this campaign, it's part of our plan to attract asset managers from advanced financial markets like North America, Japan, and Australia, but also because we really want to make a noise about this, because your industry and its place in the UK has so much to shout about. We have an open, liberal economy, a highly skilled, multicultural workforce, and of course, a long and successful history in asset management. And I really hope that this campaign can be a platform to raise the profile of the UK as an asset management centre, actually as the global asset management centre. And of course, we'll see the results of that by increasing the assets under management here in the UK, by attracting more capital, and of course, through all of that, building recognition with overseas investors. We should just realize that the whole UK economy benefits when overseas investors invest through the UK. Not only are investment funds at the center of the city's ecosystem, but it's an interesting fact that funds managed from the UK tend to overweight the UK. So there's a degree of self-interest also in wanting these funds to be managed from London. And we only have to look at overseas investment in the UK, into UK infrastructure, for example, and into high growth technology, to see what a profound effect that investment has on our growth agenda. And it's absolutely clear that increased investment lifts productivity, it boosts employment, and it improves average wages. Now, part of my role as the United Kingdom's Minister for Investment is to be in daily contact with investors from around the world and here in the UK to gain an understanding of their priorities. And that includes finding out what are the barriers they face and what we can do to make the UK as investable as possible. Now, I work with colleagues across government to act on their concerns, and part of that is I think it's vital to apply an investor lens to our policy making processes. The Prime Minister is also a huge believer in the power of inward investment. He's made it, both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have made it one of our leading priorities. Established the Office for Investment. I lead that team, and this very much prioritizes high value investments in the industries of the future. We are actively engaging with industry and investors to improve the business environment. And this year, we will build on the almost £18 billion of inward investment that the Office for Investment has so far helped win for the UK. So that's why, alongside this Global Investment Futures campaign, our government will work alongside your industry to increase your global competitiveness even further. And I've got an open door on these matters. So always feel that you can contact me directly if there's ways that I can help. And by leveraging your expertise, we will develop an innovative proposition for global investors. We will continue to attract top-class talent, and we will cement the UK's position as the leading global investment management centre. So thank you all very much, and thank you for your participation today.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Lord Mayor, thank you very much for your supportive words in launching today's summit, and it's a great pleasure to follow the Lord Mayor and indeed Lord Grimstone, who many of us in the industry and in the room here today, physically as well as virtually, know so well. Isn't it tremendous that here at last the UK is taking a big step forward in promoting one of our true global success stories as an industry? Investment management has been perhaps too long that unsung hero of financial and professional services, the industry that was just getting on with the job, out of the spotlight, but a true globally successful industry. As we heard from the Lord Mayor and from Lord Grimstone, we're now an industry expansively of some £11 trillion worth of assets under management across the entire industry. From the UK's point of view, we're now an industry where 2/3 of UK households use the services of an asset manager. That shows that we're an industry of scale, of breadth, and of national importance. But beyond these shores, we are also an industry of global outreach and international perspective. It is true that whilst the American investment management industry may be larger, I would argue that actually here in the UK, we are the most international in outlook. And not only are we a national success story, but we are also an international success story. Here in the UK, we manage more assets for European citizens, yes, I did say European citizens, than any other asset management centre across the whole of Europe. Indeed, we are of such scale that we are larger than France, Germany, and Switzerland added together. Now, that is not said by way of boast, but simply a reflection of the instrumental, the fundamental role that we play in powering the European economy. Our industry over recent years has gone from strength to strength as international asset owners have looked to the UK to manage their assets, whether that's pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, or other international investors. They have all sought out the level of expertise and innovation that the UK has made our home in to be a global success. And as we look to the future, whether that's on greening the economy, and let's remember that the UK is the natural home of sustainable and responsible investment way ahead of other international competitors, or indeed in how our industry is deploying tech, particularly fintech, all the way through the investment process and modernising the operational platform of our firms. We have a lot to offer international asset owners as they look to the future and decide where they want their assets managed. So that's why it's a great pleasure to be here today to launch the investment management campaign. It feels like too ephemeral a word, actually, for this structurally important program that we're launching today. It's a 3-year program, yes, supported by the industry, and I'm delighted to say that we have now 20 major member firms that have stepped forward to promote and work with us to launch the Global Investment Management Summit, but also a partnership, a deep partnership with our good friends in the City of London Corporation and in the Department for International Trade. It's a joy to be able to say that it's also supported by KPMG. Thank you, KPMG, for all the hard work that you're putting into this. And of course, with the great support now of Treasury. So here we see government, the industry, and our great hosts in the City of London Corporation coming together to promote the investment management industry. A true success story and something that we are delighted to have this great campaign to promote. I'm also delighted to be able to say today that we are fixing on a date for the Global Investment Management Summit, which will be the centerpiece of this 3-year campaign. The Global Investment Management Summit will be held here in the City of London on the 14th and 15th of September, designed to showcase the best in innovation, thought leadership, and deep expertise that we have here in the UK. And yes, it will be held in London, but it will be a national programme celebrating the best that asset management from Land's End to John O'Groats has to offer to those international asset owners who we're looking forward to welcoming on the 14th and 15th of September. Had to say the date twice, just because I could see everybody writing it down. So quick, write down 14th and 15th of September. So ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I announce that we are getting the show on the road. For too long, we have outsourced promotion of our industry to our very, very good friends in Luxembourg and in Dublin. But it was time for the UK to put a brave foot forward, and that's what we're doing here today. We're about to hear from John Glen, the City Minister, who has been such a great friend of the investment management industry since taking up a role in office a little over 4 years ago. And while we hear from John, I will be inviting my panel to take their seats on the stage. So please, can we hear from John? Panel, can I invite you to the stage, please? And we'll make a start. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the launch of the Global Investment Futures campaign. My name's John Glen, I'm the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, and I'm the Government Minister for the last 4 years who's been responsible for financial services in the United Kingdom. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to contribute to today's event. Now, my job as Economic Secretary is to help build an environment for financial services to prosper in the UK. That's not just in the short term, but sustainably into the future. The investment management sector is key to the success of the UK as a financial services hub and is central to its future success. With £11 trillion of assets under management, we have the second largest sector globally. And obviously that means that that sector make an invaluable contribution to the economy, supporting more than 110,000 high-value jobs in the UK and, crucially, channeling funding to businesses. For those and many other reasons, the government is determined that the UK remain a global leader for asset management. Doing that means working very closely with the sector to maintain and bolster the strength of the UK's offer. But it's important that all of us, government and industry alike, make sure that those strengths are well understood globally. This is an exciting time. Our skills and the expertise that I've referred to, our strength in sustainable investment and green finance, and of course our pioneering fintech sector, means that the UK has much to offer managers and investors alike, here at home and of course abroad as well. These unique competitive advantages mean our already world-class markets are continuing to grow, with the size of assets under management in the UK have increased by over $1 trillion in 2020 alone. We are leading the way in green finance, and it's our ambition to become the first net zero aligned financial centre. Our new economy-wide sustainability disclosure requirements and our first green gilt issuances underscore that determination. We're working to create a more innovative funds regime to enhance the UK's attractiveness for setting up and managing funds. We're supporting the creation of a wider range of investments better suited to investors' needs, such as the UK's long-term asset fund structure created at the end of last year. And we're committed to an outward-looking approach to financial services, negotiating an ambitious mutual recognition agreement with Switzerland and leveraging our bilateral dialogues with other global markets, including the US, Singapore, Japan, Australia, to remove those unnecessary barriers and champion openness and collaboration. So we need to continue to get the message out there, to let the world know what's happening, which is exactly why the UK government and industry are working together to launch today's Global Investment Futures campaign. And I can't wait to see the results in the coming months. Thank you.
Well, good heavens, we could hardly have more of a positive message from government, could we? Excellent, excellent. So now we come to the interactive part of this afternoon. I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of leading business people from the industry, and we're looking forward to taking your questions. So please do sharpen your questions in a very positive and constructive way, you understand. We'll be taking questions from people in the room, but also those who are joining us virtually as well. But the purpose of this afternoon session is to look at what makes the UK such an attractive place to do business for asset management firms. I think we recognise we're starting from a good place, building from firm foundations, but obviously more work to be done. We live in a very competitive global environment where people look to the UK's asset management industry with envious eyes, and other jurisdictions want to grow their investment management business, but I feel the game is ours to lose. So of course, let's not. I'm joined on the panel by four very distinguished speakers, very distinguished speakers, and I will do them a little justice, I hope, by saying a little bit about their backgrounds, and then we will proceed to questions and answers. So I'm joined by Sean Hegarty. Sean is Managing Director of Vanguard Europe. Sean's responsible for leading the operations of Vanguard here across Europe. He relocated to London from their global HQ in 2016, but has really settled in, actually, a major part of the UK industry these days. He joined Vanguard in 1997 and held various jobs there. And Sean, welcome. Thank you. Next is Claire Bousfield. Claire is MD Retail and Savings for M&G. As Retail and Savings Chief, Claire is responsible for leading the expansion of M&G Wealth in the UK and completing the transformation of the Prudential branded operations to improve customer outcomes and generate greater business efficiencies. Prior to this, Claire was Chief Financial Officer for M&G and held roles in not only Prudential, but with Aegon, Swiss Re and PwC before then. Since 2020, Claire has been a non-exec of RSA Group. Claire, welcome, welcome. On my left, I'm delighted to be joined by Caroline Conlon, CEO of Personal Wealth at Aberdeen. A recent joiner to Aberdeen, Caroline joined there in October 2021 as CEO of Personal Wealth and is a member of the executive leadership team. She's responsible for shaping and leading their growth strategy for savings and pre-retirement, with a focus on helping individuals plan and save for the future that works for them. Before joining Aberdeen, I think as we all know, Claire was CEO of Brooks Macdonald, and before that she held senior positions in HSB, Standard Life and at McKinsey. And last, but by no means least, delighted to be joined today by Martin Gilby. Martin is Senior Director and UK Country Head for Franklin Templeton. Martin's responsible for providing the strategy, leadership and management of the overall business operations for the UK. And prior to joining Franklin Templeton, he worked for Aberdeen and has also held senior roles internationally with Barclays, Inside Investment, SWIP and Aberdeen. So Martin, welcome, welcome. So as you can tell, not only a leading panel of experts, but indeed industry luminaries. So we are going to invite questions a little later, but first let's hear from the panelists about what makes the UK an attractive place to do business. What are our strengths, area of expertise, and perhaps room for growth? And Sean, we're going to start off with you.
Okay, thank you. I bring, I hope, a unique perspective as somebody who grew up in the US and worked for a US-based firm that decided to put our European headquarters in the UK. And I'll mention three things I think that make the UK particularly attractive for firms that are global in nature. First is public sector, and we've just heard from members of the public sector that I think are very supportive, but obviously the UK has a long history from a perspective of rule of law, from very strong support from the government and Treasury, and a regulator that we have a lot of respect for, that in our opinion, really does look to outcomes that favor investors, our clients, which we think is a very attractive reason for us to want to do business here. The second thing is private sector, and the industry here is very dynamic. There is a significant amount of infrastructure that is self-reinforcing, that attracts talent. That talent makes the infrastructure that much stronger. So you get a flywheel effect in that it creates a situation where the private sector has a comparable advantage compared to other places, which is a significant part of why we're here to, and take advantage of some of that talent. I'd personally say that it's a great place to go because when you ask somebody if they want to relocate, the UK is usually first on their list. It was first on my list anyway. And so I think that, but that's not trivial. The fact is this is a place where people want to live. And I think that really does help to maintain the value of the UK as an investment management hub. The last thing I would say, and then I'll stop, is that we've been at my firm, but me personally, been impressed with the leaders and the colleagues in the industry who I think are really leading the way on things that are very important. One is delivering strong outcomes for investors. It's terrific to talk to colleagues in the industry about how focused we are on that, how focused we are on creating diversity, equity, and inclusion in the industry in the UK, and focused on being leaders in environmental issues and understanding what our role is in society with respect to ESG broadly. And that makes it, for us, a pretty attractive place to do business.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. So it's that combination of a private sector that's willing to listen and work with the public sector to achieve good outcomes. It's around talent and indeed innovation, but leadership as well, leadership from the industry.
That's right.
Yeah.
Not without challenge.
Not without challenge.
Plenty of challenge from the public sector, but I think that challenge is well intended and encouraged.
Thank you. Claire.
So from my perspective, one of the things that I think is very interesting about the UK is the spread that we have across the country. So if you look at the industry, has got a strong presence, whether it's up in Scotland, Northern England, and across London, I think is extremely powerful in terms of the industry and the talent that we're able to provide. And from my perspective, that's something that's close to my heart. I look after the retail and savings business of M&G, and we pretty much are in pretty much every city across the UK. And that's one of the things that I think is a core strength in terms of where we go. The other areas that I think are important is innovation and infrastructure, private assets. I think some of the innovation that we've seen in this country and just through the entrepreneurship that we have is a strength and something we need to continue to invest in. And I think the investment management industry is absolutely fundamental to that. The third area that I would just comment on, having been a CFO myself and been out basically selling the business to fund managers, the one thing that you really notice is how much London and the UK is important in terms of that kind of sales pitch. There's nowhere else in the world that you can go to one city and basically see pretty much every single asset manager that you need to in terms of being able to sell. Now that is also true across Scotland as well, but I would say compared to other countries internationally, it is quite distinct in terms of a market.
I think so, and thank you for picking up on that national focus, because sometimes people think, oh, asset management, well, that's all about London, isn't it? And that's why as part of my remarks, I wanted to really stress the point that 2/3 of UK households now use the services of an asset manager. So anybody who thinks that we're a London industry, a southeast industry, is really taking a very historic view. So actually our national profile is so important, and that does contribute to the good that we can deliver across communities around the country as well. And of course that sense of innovation, which I know whenever I'm back in the olden days when we could get on aeroplanes and go to different places, one of the things that people used to say around the world was that the UK was seen to be a place for innovation. I think we lose that at our peril. Caroline, what makes it special for you?
Yeah, well, I think when we were talking about it earlier, we were talking about actually how we can help individual investors, and as you know, this is a topic that's very close to my heart. I mean, I think that there's two ways to look at this. Is one, how do we actually help people fulfill their goals through investing? And the second thing is, how do we then align that with actually supporting the broader benefits in the economy, and particularly investing in sort of societal and economic projects and investments that really benefit all. And I think, as we've heard today, asset management as an industry is very strong in the UK. It's got lots going for it, some things still to work on. And I think it's a really good place to do business. But I do believe that there's a huge opportunity in the UK to help more investors save for the future, but also to take that skill set and look more globally and how we can take some of the developments that we've done, the innovation, the way we think about solutions much more globally. Because the context to all of this, as we all know, is that we have societies where the responsibility is moving from often large organizations or the public sector to individuals to save for the future. Many aren't, in fact, the vast majority of us aren't saving enough, and we have aging populations coming through. And therefore, we really need to engage people in a way that makes them think about why they need to do it and provide solutions that make it easy for them, both in terms of the actual offering, but also in how they engage and how they end up buying. And I think innovation, not just in supporting face-to-face discussions, but actually how do we do that much more remotely through digital means is a way to make it far more accessible to many people. Now, I think the UK asset management sector has done a great job in sort of building to deliver for this opportunity. But I do think there's, as I've been talking about, there's far more that we can do both in the UK, but also as we look internationally. But it does require the clear vision that I think this forum and summit is bringing to it, and that collaboration, cohesion between the industry, the government, and the regulators. So I think it's absolutely fantastic to see that. Now, this link between investing and the difference it makes, I think, is something that really resonates with individual investors. So those familiar with Aberdeen, and it's obviously by its very name, and Standard Life is started its life north of the border, both Aberdeen and Standard Life. But those of you familiar with Aberdeen will know that core to our purpose is enabling our clients to be better investors. And I think that's something that is important to the individual client, whether they be personal or institutional or one of the IFAs that works with us. But it is also really core to the link between personal investing and actually the global economy and the role that we can play. And it's not just about helping individuals plan for their futures, but it's also about helping them realize the impact that they're having, causes that are maybe close to their heart, or that broader positive impact on society. And a piece of research that we did showed that investors, or a third of investors would invest more if they really understood the impact that they are having, whether that be economic benefit or broader societal benefit. And I do think that the track record we have in sustainability here is something, and the framework in which that sits is something that's really important to encourage more individuals to invest in the UK, but also something that we can take abroad or even attract foreign investment into the UK. So I think overall there's lots that's going well. There's still a lot of opportunity to go after. I do think working together and making sure that we can set the right environment for that is a really important one, and there's growth opportunities both domestically and more internationally there.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll want to pick up on that theme of helping people here in the UK to save and invest better. And I'm struck by the recent FCA Invest Smart campaign with their commitment to move 1.7 million people from cash savings into longer term better investing. And I'm sure we can touch on regulation as we go through, and indeed on sustainable and responsible investing as well, which of course is becoming a hallmark of the industry. So a lot to pick up on. Martin.
Yeah, so thanks, Chris, and thank you for having me on the panel. And I wanted to make a few comments in a moment about specifically about talent and the role that talent plays in supporting our industry. But actually, an observation I have is and I'm sure this was by design and not by accident, but actually in my three fellow organizations representing on the panel, as a US-based asset manager with a great reputation for innovating in our domestic market, and the UK is one of the 2 or 3 top markets in the world that we're looking to export that innovation into, but also learn from. When I look at what Vanguard and M&G and Aberdeen are doing, particularly in helping democratize investments, then I think you have 3 organizations leading the market, and I think that's really important in terms of being an example of the innovation that's being driven in this market. And I'm sure there are international colleagues and international clients who will want to learn and tap into that. So a well-designed panel, at least from my right-hand side on. In terms of talent, I guess for me, look, just a couple of comments. Talent for me starts increasingly now with, or is inextricably linked into diversity and inclusion. And I think it's very difficult to think that you could have a well thought through talent strategy without D&I being at the center of that strategy. A couple of other comments linked to that. One is for really a kind of global client perspective, and another is perhaps a bit more local. I think on a global perspective, if we want to, as we do, protect and sustain the UK as having a leading place in global asset management markets in terms, then we need to have and continue to have the trust and the commitment of international clients. They want to do business with us here. And in addition to the kind of the obvious, having the operational and regulatory and technical infrastructure that supports the industry, we must also have a workforce collectively that is global in its outlook, in its makeup, that can lead on key investment trends and support clients through those journeys. And so for me, in a global perspective, having that talent here enables us to support and export out globally. In terms of a domestic point of view, though, I think, and this comes back to democratization of savings, we are clearly seeing a need, as Caroline mentioned, we are seeing a need for individuals to take more responsibility for their long-term savings and investment strategy. Interestingly, I think the pandemic has, and perhaps only temporarily, but certainly it's one of the effects of the pandemic is to reduce, it's lost my way slightly, is to reduce the savings gap, probably temporarily. And the evidence of that is the record levels of cash on deposit that we're seeing. I think everybody in the market would agree that our challenge now is to help customers make that cash work harder for them. And the answer to that, of course, is to move from savings or cash deposits to investments. And the way we do that is clearly to democratize or increase the democratization of investments. If we are going to genuinely democratize investments, then we need employees who increasingly represent the demographics and the communities and the societal values of the wider market that we're looking to help democratize. If we do that successfully, I think that ought to lead to better customer insight, better product design, product delivery, better communication to clients, customers, and obviously one would hope the logical conclusion would be better consumer outcomes. The final point I want to make in opening is that it's really important that we have a robust regulatory and legal framework to drive standards in talent. But coming back to D&I, a regulatory framework in and of itself is not the only thing that will drive that improvement. And in fact, I think the change that we'll see from mandatory reporting, for example, is going to be quite slow. And some people say it'll take a whole generation, for example, the gender pay gap, and we have ethnicity pay gap reporting and more reporting coming over the hill. I think it's really important that the industry takes ownership of voluntary sourced initiatives. And when we look at across the market, there are some fantastic examples of talent-driven innovation being implemented into the market. And we look at 10,000 black interns as an example that just 2 years ago didn't exist by 2020, Chris, which you'll be very familiar with, the Diversity Project. And I think a combination of those kind of industry-led initiatives against the backdrop of the regulatory framework is going to accelerate the change that we need to see. But for me, in closing my opening remarks, talent for me is one of the critical elements to sustaining a UK leading industry in investment management.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for expanding the discussion on talent to make sure that we're thinking about talent, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's right that an industry of our scale, but certainly of our stature, should always try to improve its practices and look more like the society it's aiming to serve. And I reflect on Investment 2020, thank you for the plug, where just in the last few years, we've placed over 2,000 kids from a very wide diversity of background, into industry firms and given them a life chance that perhaps would have been unimaginable just a few years before. And with retention rates in the 74–75%, it's just quite breathtaking how this industry prizes meritocracy, despite some of the perceptions of people who are standing on the sidelines. So I think we have made strides, but it's a subject we must approach in great humility, recognizing, good heavens, we've got a distance still to travel. So I think there are three themes there that we should think about picking up in questions. The first one is around sustainable and responsible investment. And it'd be great to hear from the panel in terms of how you think the industry is eating that particular elephant. You know, how are we digesting such a radical change of expectations from asset owners, from retail investors, and indeed from the policy-making community here at home and more internationally. I can't help but think the UK's leadership in sustainable and responsible investment, much challenged though it is, provides us a solid foundation for the future if we grasp the opportunity. The second area perhaps we could think about as well is technology. A lot of time and effort is spent talking around fintech. And as I often say when I'm doing talks to school kids or university undergraduates, when they tell me they're looking to join fintech firms, and I say, great, which investment management firm are you joining then? Because we were the original fintechs. We're just fintech with a MiFID permission or an AFMD review. Anyway, so there's an opportunity there for us to be maybe promoting ourselves a little bit more to that next generation of people looking to build their careers. But actually our industry's got a lot to offer from a tech point of view in innovation. It'd be good to hear your view on that. And of course, talent, which we keep coming back to as a global offer. And it's right that we should be thinking about how we grow our own. But if you're going to be the global center in any industry, but particularly for investment management, then that ability to attract the best people in the world to come and work here in the UK must be paramount in our industry's thinking, and the advice that we give to government in maintaining that international purchase that we have on markets. So perhaps three issues that we can start with. And then of course hear from the audience here and at home or in their offices. So let's start first on the sustainable and responsible investment question. And I'm looking around the panel because we started first with Sean, so it'd be unfair to ask him to go first. So I'm going to ask Caroline to go first on this one, then we can open the batting on this side.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it in the context of personal investing, but obviously it's much broader than that. It's much more, it's relevant to every type of investor out there. I think we do a fantastic job of investing to the sort of sustainable principles. Do we do as good a job as communicating that and actually getting people really excited by it and the impact that it makes on a day-to-day basis? I think probably not consistently. At least there's probably some very good examples about that. So I do believe that there's, you know, maintaining the framework, maintaining the principles, ensuring that we don't have, you know, the greenwashing and all the rest that goes on, I think is really important. But actually, I think it's now tilted to the point where we need to be talking more about the impact, whether that's domestic or globally, that's been had through the money that's going into those types of funds, because that's something that, particularly for the younger savers, who, you know, they may not have huge amounts to invest right now, but they're actually starting to choose where they're investing. And I think actually getting them into the habit of thinking through that as they're making their investment choices is very important.
I think I've said for a while now that I think the UK and parts of the European market, not from a regular perspective, from a client perspective, are almost in a post-ESG world. And by that I mean that it's taken as a given that ESG in some form or another, or sustainable finance, is integrated into most investment portfolios to one degree or another. I think that's less the case in the US and in Asia Pacific, but as a global firm, you know, we're in a position to see that that situation is changing all the time. And so therefore bringing this back to the role of the UK and the UK industry in a global context, you know, ESG will, in its broadest terms, I think, will be as fundamental to investment as the technology we use, as active versus passive. So clients all around the world, as they go on this journey, will want to be able to leverage insight, learning. They will want to go to trusted sources of insight And I think that's what the UK has an opportunity to try. Beyond the regulatory kind of Article 8 and 9, it's actually what tying all of that back to what clients' values are. And I think we have a unique opportunity to lead on that.
Me too. Claire.
Yeah, so I'm going to repeat a little bit of Caroline and Martin's comment around just how do we communicate with the people out there on the street in terms of what does this mean for them. So one of the things that scares me is that we'll basically produce another annual report that basically has every single piece of data around sustainability and ESG to the point where people will just be bored senseless by the topic. So for me, the real test here is how do we actually get those disclosures to something that is actually going to mean something to people who are actually saving and really care about this. And that, I think, is going to be incredibly hard, but will be incredibly powerful if we can actually be successful in terms of delivering on that.
John.
Yeah, maybe a different view on this, but I want to tell you why I think the UK is so important and vital to getting ESG investing right. And I'll start with two things that I think ESG investing I would caution is not. We have to be cautious of over-promising better returns just because it's called ESG. I think we have to be cautious about over-promising the actual impact on the environmental outcomes based on investing in ESG, because I think it insinuates that you're going to change the cost of capital, and without any other action, that in fact will keep the planet from going over 2 degrees. I think that's a promise that's tough to keep. We do think, though, that ESG investing serves a very important purpose for investors in terms of a non-financial utility that they gain from investing in an ESG portfolio that says, I'm willing to invest and get a return that's different than what the total market would give me because of that non-financial utility. And back to the UK, why it's so important is because regardless of what we're doing as asset managers, or regardless of the portfolios, the UK Stewardship Code is the gold standard, and stewardship, in our opinion, is the foundation for how the asset management industry will have an impact on ESG in a very positive way if we talk about the disruption that's coming to those companies that are most likely to be the issues with respect to carbon emissions. And so I think sustainability in the UK, I think is super important. It's clearly on everybody's mind. And I think that the UK has a very thoughtful approach to it. I think different than Europe and maybe better than the continent, in that I think there's a thoughtful approach that will actually look at all of those components and make sure we get it right, as opposed to some potentially unintended consequences of doing it wrong as an industry.
I think it's probably time that we went to the audience for questions as well. So we will start with inviting the first question, please. I can see some hands going up. I think Nick Tolchard was the first, and then we'll continue. If I could ask you please to introduce yourself. Nick, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, Nick Tolchard, currently representing the City UK New Markets Group, chairing a FinTech initiative, actually. Very interested in your comments about accessibility of the industry, both from a perspective of the UK investors, but global investors as well. And the fact that ESG provides, a whole range of new industries for investors to invest in and perhaps become passionate about why they're doing that. I'm talking to international investors. There's one word that hasn't been mentioned so far, which is around governance. And certainly the governance in the UK, I think, is perhaps one of the leading propositions that we slightly overlook, which is the real sort of safeguard for private investors. Could I ask the panel to explain a little bit about how they feel this partnership with government, how you feel you can leverage the global network that is Global Britain, the government post that exists around the world? How do you feel that is a benefit over the next 3 years as we drive this agenda forward?
So the UK, of course, is extremely fortunate in having such a professional Foreign and Commonwealth Office with posts in all major nations. So it's and of course, we have our great partners here today, the Department for International Trade, who are stalwarts in helping communicate this message and the importance of investment management outwards, but also attracting inward investment. And we heard from Lord Grimstone a little earlier on that. Martin, I might come to you first, actually, as chair of our relevant committee on these issues, to get your views. And perhaps we could have a comment or two from the panel, and then we'll go back for more questions. Otherwise, I can see questions building up, and I do want to make sure we have some discussion today.
Thank you to my deputy chair for the question as well. I think it's fair to say that when we talk to, either through the information we pick up through the committee or at Franklin Templeton when we talk to international clients, the relationship that they describe, I guess, domestically with their own regulator or their own government around the level of proactive support for the industry differs greatly to what we see here, or what's potentially on offer here, I think. And that's not to say that support doesn't exist. It tends to be more point and tell rather than engage. And obviously I'm generalizing enormously, and I'm not saying that we are the kind of the forefront and the gold standard necessarily, but I do think that we get clients coming to us asking for insight and asking for opinion on, a range of subjects that you could link under the governance label. And it's, I think, interesting that we have a different level of engagement here, and today's clearly, indicative of that sort of spirit of partnership. I do think we shouldn't rest on our laurels. I think we have to continually earn that right for clients to come to us and say, can we learn from what you're doing? And I think, if I'm being very honest, we have yet to grasp wherever you were on the referendum. The fact is, post-Brexit, Britain needs to develop and win in a number of key areas. I believe financial services, and specifically investment management, is one of them. And I don't think we've really got off to, we haven't done too much yet. And so this is why I bring this back to the launch today of this campaign. Is so important that we build on the momentum of today.
In which case, we'll go to the next question from the audience, and we'll also, whilst that question is being asked, we'll also have a look at the virtual questions, please, because I know the virtual questions are coming in too. Please.
Thank you, Chris. Phil Clark, the Guild of Investment Managers, and spent 37 years in the industry as well. I think the word futures resonates with me, and some of the comments being made tonight talk about the asset management industry, and most of us, I think, would feel we connect to an industry as adults. Some of us learned about it as adults, some of us joined it through the degrees or then the professional qualifications. But I wonder what the panel's view is on making the education of kids in school to have a bespoke, a required part of the curriculum to really learn about investment management and about savings as an embedded part of the curriculum, and not, maybe it's an option as a GCSE or an A-level, but to make it a requirement. So it seems to me that gives the opportunity for kids to feel they can influence their future. If they understand they have a pension in the future, they could choose their pension provider or their investment manager that accords with their own values, particularly when you think about the fears they have for the next 10 years around climate change. So the question is, do you think there's more we can do to embed investment and savings understanding in the school curriculum?
Great questions.
Caroline,
please do.
I think I was showing my age when I was having a conversation about this more recently, and I said, one of the biggest things that I think the school system has done going the wrong way is get rid of home economics. And somebody looked at me and went, what do you mean home economics? But I'm sure many of you sort of can remember those days where it was basic banking, and it was it was about how do you open a bank account, how do you manage your bills, etc. as a household, and that's clearly just a very base level. But I believe passionately that actually financial education should happen in a school environment, because it actually equips people to make as informed decisions as they can. And at the moment, I think we have people leaving school, their parents may not be well versed in how to manage their finances, and they come out, and it's not just about saving for their future, it's actually about the day-to-day side of it, and maybe making not the best financial decisions there. So I think if we can do something as an industry or as firms, whatever we can do will only help. But I agree with you completely, so I don't know, I can't really say any more than that.
Well, please, Claire and then Sean.
So yeah, I mean, if you look at the client base that my business has very mass market, old Prudential, man from the Peru type. And I would say, having listened to some of the calls that I have with customers, it is frightening how little people really understand about just the basics in terms of what this is about. And I was struck when I spent 2 years in the US, just how much a typical American has a much better grasp of what I would describe as some of the investment kind of risk, stock market, etc. So I've always been a strong believer that we have to get something into the school system in order to help people actually understand this, because that's the only way we're really gonna move that forward. So I totally agree with you, Phil, in terms of that being something that we should definitely sponsor.
Yes, sure. As a typical American.
As a typical American, I would tell you that our experience is that the Americans have no idea how to invest, and I think and we did a lot of work on this, you know, from way back when we had the kind of the advent of the 401k, you know, defined contribution savings plans in the U.S., where we were trying to educate employees on how to invest. Honestly, wasn't all that successful. It's challenging to do so. And we have shifted from, there's probably about 25% of the population that would be willing to do it a little bit on their own, but 75% of the population that says, I don't want to fix my own car, I want the mechanic to do it. So we do think advice and digital advice are very important to the future of the industry. And the second thing I would say is we've done a lot on the philanthropic side to try and do financial literacy. We've worked with universities who have centers for financial literacy in the US, and found that interventions that attempt to educate with information, what is the stock market, what's a value stock, in one ear, out the other. We do have a successful intervention called the classroom economy, where the teachers can set up in an economy within the classroom, which tries to teach financial values and financial, not literacy, but how to think about finances from a values perspective, which does stick and stays with the kids, as opposed to the information about what's an interest rate on a credit card. And so those interventions we do seem to think can work, and would encourage the UK to be thinking about that. Financial responsibility as opposed to financial literacy, if that makes sense.
Chris, if I may just highlight one, a very alarming statistic that brings your question into sharp focus is the FCA came out last week, and I think the figure was 65% of new participants in the market in terms of people trading. I think they were looking at kind of this explosion of direct-to-consumer, younger consumers starting to trade into the stock market. 65% responded to a survey, and they didn't understand the concept that they could lose money. They just thought it was a one-way trade. And if that's remotely true, then that brings into sharp focus, you know, the point that you raise about why education is so important. And we can't democratize investments if people can't engage with that level of basic understanding of what's involved.
We've seen, I think, 2.5 million new trading accounts opened over the last 2 years during the pandemic, which is both a great opportunity to help better educate those people who are participating, but also a great worry if people don't realize that it's capital at risk, or indeed they think they're playing a game with no consequences. Certainly from the charitable endeavors that I've been part of and the industry campaigns, the golden ticket seems to be educate the teachers, because the only way to educate the kids is to get the teachers to understand what was going on. And I participated in a classroom discussion where teachers were saying, look for the highest interest rate. The highest interest rate is the best deal. Sadly, we were talking about credit cards. And so that shows the gap sometimes that we have to address in terms of actually who to educate and how. Ladies, gentlemen, all of you who have joined us this afternoon, I'm terribly sorry, but time has beaten us. It's always the case, isn't it, when panels that you're enjoying participating in, and I hope listening to, have eaten away at the time. So can I please ask you to thank everybody on the panel this afternoon for being jolly good sports and answering all of your questions. Thank you. Thank you. I'm now delighted to pass over to Catherine McGuinness, the Chair of Policy and Resources at the City of London Corporation, for final remarks.
Thank you. Shall we?
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chris. And that's been a really fascinating discussion. Thank you, all of you, for this panel, which we could carry on for another hour, I'm absolutely sure. It's been a great discussion on the UK's investment management offer and an industry that employs so many across the country, that does so much for businesses and households at home and abroad, and yet remains one of the UK's great untold success stories. And it's really vital, I suggest, that we spotlight this sector, and I'd like to thank the Lord Mayor, Lord Grimstone, John Glen, you, Chris, and the panel for launching the Global Investment Futures campaign here with us this evening, reminding us why the UK is the best place to do this business, because, as our panel explained, London and the UK has a wealth of attributes that makes it a unique place to do business. Whether it's our innovative ecosystem, our infrastructure, or our investment specialisms. But we're not just here to celebrate our past or present. This is really about our offer for the future. This is really about telling people that London is open for business and committed to this vital sector. And not just about the day job, for the livability too that attracts people to want to come and base themselves here. London and the UK can be really proud of our holistic offering to professionals and their families. We remain also the best place to connect to global markets because of our reach and depth, with a market base already extending to investors from Australia to China, from Japan to the United States, and yes, Chris, to Europe too. London is the business gateway to the world, and not just London. That huge national offer that we have, whether it's from Edinburgh to Exeter, Belfast to Bournemouth, or Land's End to John O'Groats, that network of finance and professional services hubs that we have enables us to have to make an offer like no other, something that can make the local global and the global local with ease. And finally, I think crucial to our offering is what we've just been discussing about that ability to align investment opportunities with worldwide challenges, none more important at the moment, of course, than climate change. And as markets shift increasingly towards investment in sustainable and responsible investment and investment in transition, London and the UK must be at the heart of that movement, working with partners on this critical global challenge, something which will really play to our existing strengths. So look, we here in the City of London Corporation, we're really proud to be working in partnership with the Investment Association, the Department for International Trade and KPMG towards the bold ambition to double UK assets under management by 2030. An ambitious target which will only be achieved if we not only build on those strengths and provide the regulatory framework and so on, all the other infrastructure that we need, but if we tell people about those strengths too, those strengths as a leading global asset management centre. As I said, we're open for business and we want the world to know it. So, as I end my remarks and close this evening, just 2 minutes late, I really welcome the beginning of the Global Investment Futures campaign. I think we have really important work to do over the next 3 years, and it's great to be with you here this evening as we launch that. Now, thank you very much for listening to me. Thanks once again to the panel. For those in the room, I look forward to carrying on the discussion over a drink. And for those watching from home or their office, I suggest that the drink may be in your fridge or your kettle. Thank you all very much. Good night.